name's Will Harris. I'm a fellow this year at the Institute for Ideas and Imagination, and I'm a writer from London, mainly a poet, but I've also done other things, essays, and I'm currently writing a book on the care system in London.
My name is Dr. Paris Adkins-Jackson. I go by abbreviation of my last name, which is AJ. I am many things, but my current title at Columbia University is Assistant Professor of Epidemiology and Sociomedical Sciences. And I like to study racism and create interventions so that we can reduce its effects on health.
So maybe I could start the conversation with the many things part of your way you described yourself, because I'm really curious about people who do many things, and particularly when it spans the sciences and humanities, I guess, because that's quite an unusual combination. And you were saying before that it wasn't an obvious path into science for you, or
No.
medical science.
No. So if we have to start at a beginning, I often start as a child in music. My dad was a bassist. He's actually the bassist that replaced Jermaine Jackson when he left the Jackson 5. So I grew up in music classes my entire life, playing instruments from drums to piano to trombone to bass, which is what I still play now. But then I also was put in dance classes. My mom was adamant that I learn how to maneuver my body. So she put me in dance class since 3, and that has been my life. I've attended every dance school in the city of Los Angeles, every major dance school since. Have been in several dance companies, even toured. And I'm classically trained, so I'm trained in ballet and modern and tap and jazz, but also hip hop and more African traditions.
Wow. How long were you working as a professional dancer for?
That was all of junior high and high school for me. I went to a very famous performing arts high school in Los Angeles, and I think that was when it was clear for me that I wasn't about this life. That I knew that I couldn't financially make it performing. I didn't have that grit in me to do that. So I was like, all right, what other options are there? And in junior high, I was really good at math. I loved math class. I became sort of that student that helped the teacher with other students, but I never got A's in math. And so my teachers, well-intentioned, but problematic, said, why don't you focus on the things you get an A in, which is writing and history. So that's what I planned to do in college, was going to writing. I majored in journalism, but I also got a minor in ethnic American literature because I love history. And I knew immediately after graduating, I didn't want to be a journalist. I was like, I hate this. I love storytelling, but I hated the pursuit of the story the way that journalism sort of had it outlined for me. I wanted to do more activist type stuff, help communities, be a part of communities in a way that transforms change. So I left that and went into anthropology. I got a master's in anthropology, studied the extensive human record and history so that I could understand how we come to the present. And I taught that for 14 years at the community college in my hometown of Los Angeles. But, you can't just study history and understand culture without wanting to intervene. And that's where public health came. My best friend developed breast cancer at the time, and I wanted to do something about it. And that math background came in handy. So I decided to go into epidemiology and study the trends.
Right.
And do something about it.
And was your work as an anthropologist linked to that at all?
Yeah, I think I started doing more action-based research in cancer and community-based research, and that kind of was my entry into doing more epidemiological studies. After she passed, I couldn't do cancer anymore, so I focused on my methods.
Yeah, that makes sense. What did you experience a kind of crisis of faith with anthropology in the way that you you did with earlier on with like
Yes
with
and
journalism
no.
or with
Yes and no. I think it wouldn't escalate it to a crisis, but I would say that my professors did not know what to do with me in epidemiology because my worldview was really shaped by anthropology and still to this day very shaped by understanding culture and difference. And so that makes me a different kind of scientist. I'm now finally on the other side of that, being one of the people who studies structural racism, I can now apply that anthropological knowledge and those concepts toward measuring the impact of this exposure. And I think people appreciate it more than they did a decade ago when I was in school.
Interesting. Why do you think that shift has happened, or what's it?
That has everything to do with those before me. The poor, like my poor colleagues and elders who were daring to say the word racism in rooms, who had to change the way they said it, racial discrimination, racialized disparities. They kept adapting it until they could get to the space where we can just call it structural racism. And I've sort of picked up the torch from those who come before me and use all my anthropological, epidemiological, statistical, every skill I have in me to make it happen.
I don't know about the situation in the US. I imagine it's kind of similar to the UK, but do you think public health was particularly slow to take on board the kind of like the way it was shaped by structural racism?
Absolutely, and still struggles to do that. We get a lot of backlash, like a lot of my colleagues get death threats.
Really?
Yes. Wild stuff that scientists are like in fear of studying something that's so real for so many people. But the field as a whole, there's some people who understand it's real and then create opportunities for us to really explore the consequences. But then there's some people who still hold power who don't want to name it that. So they shift it. They say it's class issue. It's something else, but not that.
That's interesting. They're prepared to talk about class, but not the ways in which class and race are kind of completely inseparable in any. Okay. And I was just wondering, well, yeah, because there's, I guess, this stereotype of the doctor as being this kind of, rationalist, enlightenment figure who's like, I don't see difference. I just like treat the case. Do you think is that something you've kind of like come up against, or is that part of the shift that's taking place, trying to like re-understand what a doctor looks like nowadays, or like how?
That's an interesting. So let me go multiple places with this. So let me first start by saying that often when we're talking about structural racism, I find people who are problematic in the conversation individualize it. It turns into an interpersonal exchange as opposed to a systemic issue where there's policies and infrastructure built to preference some groups over others. So we're talking about systems, we're not talking about individuals. The other thing I want to note is that public health, different from healthcare in the US, and I wonder what this is like in other spaces, where public health is a whole separate domain of work, where we deal exclusively with populations, where the healthcare system deals exclusively with individuals. So often when we have to talk between the groups, you do have our medical professionals who are like, well, I don't deal in any of that business. I deal with the patient in front of me. But often we have to have the conversation with them like, you are mandated by your licensing board, you are mandated by insurance, and all of these other components of a healthcare system that dictate how you make decisions. I mean, doctors do it kind of fluidly. I had a doctor speak to me recently about prescriptions first. And I was like, they're like, well, I just want to know if you've gotten health insurance to pay for this, and if you haven't, then I'm not going to prescribe it for you. What does my healthcare have to do with the cost of this particular medicine? But so these are the ways that it then influences the policy or the practices of medical professionals.
Yeah, That makes sense. I mean, in the UK, we still just about have public healthcare free at the point of access, but even then, there are still massively different outcomes, or the access, really varies depending on your background, how you're racialized, the amount of money you have. Like, there are lots of people. I was working in care homes, nursing homes. People just were terrified of going to hospitals because of traumatic experiences they'd had there, times they hadn't been seen, they'd been refused treatment, and I can imagine that adding the element of privatization is just going to make that worse, because suddenly you don't have this blanket moral demand to care for everyone. Everyone becomes a customer, and like you said, it's the personalizing it, but in a particularly neoliberal way.
And if you're aware, if the problem we often have with disciplines in the U.S. is that our educational system omits so much. So while you can have an elder, which I focus on older adults, you can have an elder that has survived things like historical lynchings, has survived residential segregation, has survived voting rights, have survived all of the ugly parts of our society. We will delete all that historical information and go, they're just an older adult that doesn't want to adhere to their medicine, or they're angry or disturbed. And I often come in and say, no, they've survived the world. The world that they survived, someone racialized as white would look at them and not give them resources. Yeah. So how are they just supposed to naturally trust you in clinic to not do the same when they had 40 years of experience with this particular history? We have to change our approach to talk to some of these elders, because we have to give room and grace for the fact that they survived the world.
Yeah. Can I ask how you ended up focusing on elder care?
I don't know. I think what happened is that when I graduated with my PhD in psychometrics, I joined the conversation about measuring racism because I have all these measurement skills, and I thought that measuring things over a historical period of time would provide better evidence for the impact of the problem. That often meant focusing on older adults. What inadvertently happened is that I got into doing dementia research, and then my grandmother developed dementia. So then it became my everyday life, and I was one of her caregivers until she passed this July 4th. And so I got to see my research at a different level, hearing like the trauma come up for her at night when she would just recall being chased by police officers, and just the ugly traumatic stuff that she went through came up in her dementia. And I was like, God, this is the stuff I study. This is the stuff I statistically demonstrate, and it's in my home. It's a part of my blood. So now I'm just like, I have to tell this story for our elders, because they deserve to be seen in a different light.
Yeah, completely. I think the way I felt about it when I started working in those settings is that we already live in a society in which the sick, the chronically ill are marginalized, invisibilized, and then, but yeah, I mean, the elders of society, even more so the ones who are racialized, who have already lived incredibly difficult lives, are just completely, if they don't conform to a particularly twee vision, I guess is what I'm saying, of an older person, then they're not really part of the conversation.
Or they can't get access to the basic resources. I remember my grandmother's social worker told me, that generation didn't think they needed to retire, or some snide comment that I was like, you recognize it's not until the 80s and the 90s that women in the United States got the right to sign for their own loans and homes, and it's not until we have Obamacare that people could have health insurance outside of a job. So what did that mean for marginalized groups that were not allowed to work full time? So then they just never got health insurance their entire lives until Medicare. It's like people don't recognize that. That's the life that my grandmother lived. What retirement fund was she going to get back? What social security was she going to get back if she lived in a world that wouldn't allow her to work full time, paid her disparate wages, and discarded her? Mm. What investment system was she going to participate in?
Yeah. I wonder, so part of the reason you're here in Paris is that you're working on a project which links back to your earlier musical dance roots.
Yeah.
But I don't really know much about the specifics of it. Is it related? Is it to a specific community? I don't know. Maybe you want to say more. Do the big reveal.
I'm excited about it because I've been needing this outlet for a while. I think. So I'll just lead into it. I've come sort of full circle because I realized with our most recent, the United States election, that informing people of racism is not enough. Measuring it, demonstrating its effects, seeing so much of my country people not care about the experiences of groups in the country is hard. So I said, hey, I need to get out of this. I need to focus on the stuff I truly love. And for me, that is art. But how do I make sure that I'm still contributing to the scientific community? Because that is important to me, right? Making some kind of change that leads to better lives later. So I've been trying to integrate art with the study of racism. And I've done that recently through producing 3 films. So from 3 studies we created 3 narrative films that we just finished about a month ago with Visage Entertainment. And then I've been trying
Who are the films of?
The films
made with, yeah.
So Visage Entertainment is the group that directed the films. And we had a lovely screenwriter, Gertrude Namara. And what we would do is we would write a scientific paper, my team, based on a study. We'd give that to their team, and then they produce the script and then film. And so now we have 3 narrative films based on 3 studies that we can take around and have conversations with. But the next sort of phase of this art and structural racism for me is the musical. So I wanted to come here because I've had this musical in my head for a while. And it's the story of human evolution and how we've come to misunderstand race. So I want to bring in that anthropology background and really talk about the sort of gene-environment interaction that leads to the physical anatomy that we see in humans. But then I also want to engage this conversation about race and group difference through religion as well, to talk about how we've just come to misunderstand these things so much, how they are not these biological differences that we're so obsessed with. And how do we then, as the next generation, shift things now that we are aware these differences are really manufactured?
That sounds great. It sounds very big. Like, it's like, those are some things. How are you bringing it together? Are you focusing on particular characters, a particular period of time, or is it quite like an ideas musical?
No, I mean, yes, and all of the above. So what I've decided to do is focus on this dialogue occurring between a teenager and the creator. And the creator takes on many forms throughout the script. It's a voice at one point. It's Eve. It's all these different individuals based on humans' understanding of who the creator is. That physical form keeps shifting. But they're having this conversation with this teenager that is sort of ahead of their time, who sees all of this as bullcrap, who has access to all this information through the internet, and is sort of pushing back on the rhetoric that has been taught to them about the differences and who's really a threat to them in society. And so that's how sort of it's going to follow them having a conversation. And I'm hoping at the end of this conversation, the teenager feels empowered to do something about it. I think the problem is I don't know what to do about it yet, so I don't know how to write that into the script. But luckily, I've just been starting at the beginning. So what I've done in these last 2 weeks is write 3 scenes and just put my head there. What's the next thing? Like yesterday, I wrote the Garden of Eden scene. It's like, okay, and what happens next? What's the conversation that needs to happen between the creator and the teenager next? That's just what I'm focusing on.
And do you have the music yet, or will that come at a later stage?
That's so stressful. I really enjoyed the film presentation last night and the conversation about how audio music sort of inspires all of the rest of the formation, because I sort of see the vision through existing songs that I know of. But I know I want to make my own original music. So I've just been using those as inspirations. Like I'll replay those songs while I'm writing the scene.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to follow a lot of advice I've gotten, which is just to write the full script. And then we'll come back and we'll write the music. So I'm going to follow that instruction.
Yeah, that sounds wise. Wow. That's so exciting. And are you taking a break from the public health work to do this? Or is this alongside? Break. There is no break.
There is no break. It's alongside, which is why it was like, okay, I could spend 3 weeks focusing on this and try to get a lot of headway. And then I'm probably going to get to a place where I spend a certain amount of hours each week working on it, because I still do have grants. I have to produce those measures. Yeah. So that work still has to get done.
Yeah. But I love the sound of it. I love the dialogue form and the way that it sounds. I mean, because it like an exploration for you, the way you don't know where it's going to end up. You're kind of discovering it in the process of making it. Yeah,
and I want to give room for people who have different ideas. I mean, the Garden of Eden scene and the I don't know what to call this dialogue. The second scene is sort of the creator and the teenager going back and forth about stuff that people got wrong, in particular the obsession of humans with gendering male and female. And how the creator feels like they've given all these examples of how you don't mistreat people, and the teenager's like, whoa, like that was not interpreted that way when people read the Bible, you know? So I'm trying to figure out how to give people who have different ideas space in the musical to let their minds go beyond the script we've been given about the Bible or the script we've been given about evolution. Let people just play.
It must be quite charged trying to think how you represent or bring to life the creator of that role, because any choice you make is kind of saying quite a lot, I guess.
That's why all of those stories will be present, because I don't want to forefront one over the other. So this is something that's important to me, is like the iterative process of the writing. So while I started with, literally when I'm writing those scenes, I'm sitting with the Bible in front of me. But the version that I wrote these last 2 weeks will not be the final version, because I will still need to sit in front of that text with the Quran. I will still need to sit with ancient Sanskrit text. I will need to sit with Ifa and a lot of the sort of ancient religions in the world, and make sure that I'm bringing everyone's voice into the space so everyone can engage and not be so offended at being removed from the conversation that they can't explore.
Maybe we should close just one more question, and a kind of more general question, maybe trying to like think of your journey to this point. I mean, does this feel like the culmination for you of everything you've been doing, and how do you feel looking back over your kind of journey to this point?
Definitely not a culmination, but I think it's a culmination of the conversation on racism. I think I have told the story in so many ways, through qualitative stories, through interventions, now quantitatively building these robust statistical models, and now I'm telling the story in musical format. That's the culmination of what I have to give about this story. If it's not received, then we cannot get to some kind of social change, understanding the impact of history on health and how we misunderstand each other so that we can change it. Then I don't know what to do. I'm just gonna have to detour to focusing on making people's lives better. And hopefully that involves some kind of crazy art. Like, I would love to make health musical videos or even do health concerts, like have a whole concert with Beyonce where everyone works out at the same time, like just focus on making people's lives better, because I can't keep trying to convince people of what is wrong. I'm just going to do what I can to make their lives better.
Sounds great. Yeah, okay. It sounds like the beginning of a new phase for you.
Yeah.
Oh, exciting. Well, yeah, it's been really lovely
Thank
talking.
you.
Yeah, thank you, AJ.
Yes.